So I wanted to open with this story for you guys. I want to tell you a story about a young man who was tired of listening to his father. He was defiant in a scary way, for he is willing not only to run away, but run away to faraway lands. Excuse me. And run he did several times. He would return home for a short time, only to run away even further the next time. The last time he ran the farthest he had ever run, and found himself in a strange land. He figured nobody would find him there. He believed nobody would want to find him anyway. He liked this faraway land. He liked it because all the defiant things he was doing at home, he could do much easier here. He liked drugs. He liked no strings attached relationships. He was all about wild living. He used manipulating words and emotions to get his way constantly and continue to feed his hideous habits. He liked letting the world know how awesome he was, and he loved getting away with it. These were his values, for he saw little, if any, value in himself. Somehow, every time the consequences breathed down his neck, he was able to narrowly escape immediate punishment. He had become a fantastically wicked liar. Excuse me. But like many addicts, there was something buried beneath. He thought about returning home, but he had burned too many bridges to make it back alive. His self-worth was so low that he felt he owed the world his permanent absence. One day, while inhaling his favorite drug, the weight of what was buried became too much to bear, and he decided it was time to end his life. He took the drugs, then he took the knife, and he cut deep, deep enough to die. He had cut himself before, but those wounds were cries for help. Going home again simply was no longer an option. For a moment he thought maybe, just maybe at the last minute, at the 11th hour, his loved ones would burst through the door, stay the blade, and rescue him from his sin just one more time. But it was not to be. He drew the knife, fired it into his wrist, and opened his flesh. The end was coming soon. Pretty morbid words. But I say this because I want you guys to understand a few things, and it'll make sense as we get toward the end. I want to transition right now to a story that's pretty famous in the Bible in Luke chapter 15. So if you have your Bibles, go ahead and turn there. Luke chapter 15. This is a story about the prodigal son. So the prodigal son, he was a runaway, for those of you guys who don't know. And what he did, very similar in a lot of ways to what the person we just talked about did. So I'm just going to go ahead and read from that. And like I said, if you have your Bibles, go ahead and follow along. So I'm reading in Luke chapter 15, starting in verse 11. So it says, "A certain man had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me a portion of my goods that falleth unto me.' And he divided unto them his living. Not so many days after, the young son gathered all together and took his journey into a far country. There he wasted his substance with riotous living. And when he had spent all that was there, arose a mighty famine in the land, and he began to be in want. And he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into the fields to feed swine. And he would fain have filled his belly with the husk of the swine that did eat, and no man gave unto him." Fain is basically a word that means he would willingly go and eat the same thing that the pigs were eating. That's how hungry and how much in want he was. Excuse me. "And when he came to himself, he said, 'How many of my father's hired servants have bread enough to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and I will say unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no more worthy to be called thy son. Make me as one of thy hired servants.' And he arose and came to his father. But when he was yet a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion, and ran and fell to his neck and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I am no more worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Bring the best robe, put it on my son. Bring him a ring, and adorn his hand. Bring him shoes for his feet. Kill the best calf I have. We're going to celebrate.'" So in the midst of this entire story, there's a runaway. He runs, he takes his father's living, he burns it all on Lord knows what. And he comes back, and he knows he messed up. He knows. But his father, who could have easily said, you're not coming back home, he got the best of everything for him. And we're going to find out why that is. So earlier in the story of Luke chapter 15, there are some comparisons that are made here, and I want to make those clear to you guys. I thought when I was reading this passage, I thought to myself, why didn't the father come after his son? I think we as children, we want our parents to come and rescue us and bail us out and show us their love. And it just really didn't sit well with me for a minute, why he did not come after his son. But I think we're going to see why here in a few minutes. First part of the story in chapter 15, verse 4, it talks about the parable of the sheep. So Jesus is talking to the Pharisees, he's talking to the teachers, the publicans, and he's telling about these parables. The first one he brings up in chapter 15 is about the sheep. And he says, wouldn't any of you who had 100 sheep and saw one of them go missing, go look for the one that's lost? Well, as a shepherd, of course you would. That's your livelihood. That's your clothing. That's your meat. That feeds your family. So Jesus is basically comparing the sheep to the lost sinner. The one who doesn't know God, who's run away from God, who has run far away to far lands. And he's asking these guys, wouldn't you do that? Wouldn't you go after him? Well, what about the father here? He didn't go after his child. He didn't go after him, and that's something that's just really odd. The second part of the story, if we go down to about verse 8 through 10, talks about a woman who lost a coin. And so it says basically, wouldn't you, if you were a woman and you had 10 silver pieces, wouldn't you, if you lost one, sweep the floor, look under things, look behind the couch, in the cushions? It doesn't say those words specifically, but the idea is there. Wouldn't you spend your hours finding that lost coin? I think most of us would, right? I would. If I lost some money, I'd be looking for it, especially if it was silver. That's kind of expensive. But the father didn't go after the son, like the coin. The woman rejoiced with her friends when she found the coin. The sheep herder rejoiced with his friends when they found the sheep, but the father did not go after his son. So people would go after money to save the money. People would go after sheep to save their livelihood. Why did this father not follow his son? Well, there are a lot of reasons. I think most of us would look at that and say, well, aren't we more valuable than the money or the sheep? I would think so. God definitely says that he feeds the birds of the air. He feeds the beasts of the field. He feeds all these animals. Don't you think he's not going to take care of you guys and meet your need? Even in your worst depression, even in your worst sadness, don't you think God is going to take care of you? It says that in the book of Matthew. So why didn't he go after him? Could it be because the son needed to make a choice? Could it be because God gave us the ability to reason? A sheep can't reason. A sheep can't say to himself, I'm lost. Oh, wow, there's a wolf. Maybe I should run. Oh, there's a robber who's going to steal me and eat me. Maybe I should run. Oh, no, a sheep can't do that. They do have a brain, but unfortunately for sheep, it's a very small one. And the coin likewise cannot think. It's an inanimate object, obviously, right? So the coin is not sitting there lying under the rug going, I hope the woman finds me. We know this is not true as well. But the son, this is different. The son spent his living on, or his father's living rather, on riotous living, it says. He was into probably things like drugs, alcohol, who knows what else. So why didn't he go after him? Did he not love him? I don't think so. Because I think that God is fully aware that we make our own choices. We decide when we're going to run and when we're going to stay. And at the end of the day, here's the beautiful part of this whole thing. God's there waiting at home. for you, for me. Not only is he waiting for you guys, even after you mess up, even after you make a mistake, even after you sin, even after you spend your inheritance, even after you engage in riotous living, even after you run far, far away, God's still waiting there at home for you. He knows you needed to make a choice. He knows you needed to decide. Do I want this life of riotous living? Or do I want to go home to my Father who's been taking care of me this whole time? At the end of the day, the son comes home. He comes home and he's thinking to himself, oh, my dad's going to kill me. I'm done. I might as well go back and just ask to be a servant, just so I can eat. And that wasn't the case. They celebrated upon his return. They celebrated. They ate the biggest calf. They had a merry party. He put this nice robe on him. He gave him a ring. He gave him shoes because his journey was probably long and hard and tired, even though he chose it. And his feet were probably hurting. He gave him shoes for his feet, and he took care of him, and he welcomed him home. That's a lot of love right there. And I think our parents are definitely feel that way about us, but more so, I think that our Father feels that way about us, our Father in heaven. We run, we stray, we say, no, God, I need to go over here. I need to experience all these wants and desires. Sometimes it's just to have fun. Other times it's more serious. Other times it brings about depression. And unfortunately for a lot of us, we stay gone. But the son didn't stay gone. He came home. He knew he came to his senses, and he came home. And the Father rejoiced. And I want to tell you guys right now that whatever's going on in your life, whatever you feel like running from, we all have things we run from. I know that. God's waiting for you. He's waiting at home for you. He's waiting to embrace you. He's waiting to spoil you. He's waiting to lavish you in his love, and he's waiting to just welcome you home. So at the beginning, I talked about that traveler, that person who went to faraway lands, and he engaged in all this riotous living. And he went home, or he stayed gone. He kept running further and further away, and it looked like it was the end for him. For those of you who are here, it looked like he was going to take his own life. Well, I'm pleased to tell you that was not the end for him. Though it seemed that way, it seemed like there was no way out. Nobody was going to come rescue him. God was waiting for him. God was waiting for him back home. A couple months later, this individual actually found out that God was waiting for him. And God lavished him in his love. He told him how many times, I love you, I'm glad you're home, son. I'm glad that you didn't take your life. I'm glad that you did not destroy it. I can redeem you. The prodigal son was redeemed when he went home, and this individual was also redeemed when he found God. So I want to tell you that no matter what you guys are going through, and I know as teenagers you guys are going through a lot. Been there, done that. The only thing that's different is the time. But whatever you're running from, whatever you want to run from, God's going to be waiting for you. He's going to be waiting for you to choose him and to come home. And I hope you never forget that, no matter what you guys do.